This is the Better Ottawa Municipal Panel. Today is Wednesday, the 3rd of September. My name is Neil Saravandamutu. I'm joined by Joanne Chianello and John Willing. Welcome to you both.
Hello, hello.
Hi.
Okay, listen. City Council is back after their summer holiday, and we've got quite a lot to cover today. So why don't we jump straight into it? We've got 4 issues we want to go through. The first is the Integrity Commissioner issued a report on Stephanie Plante, which was discussed at City Council. So let's talk about that. And just to set this up, the Integrity Commissioner was saying that Stephanie Plante had breached the city's code of conduct with her social media postings. So, John, why don't you get us started? Tell us what the Integrity Commissioner had to say and then how Council responded to that.
Yeah, so the Integrity Commissioner is Karen Shepherds, the Integrity Commissioner. Looked into some complaints of Councillor Plante's, I guess, social media posts during the time when the sprung structure debate. We've talked about the sprung structures before on the pod, so that was hot. And so there were some complaints made against the councillor's posts relating to the debate that was happening. And so specifically, someone complained about a meme she posted on a social media post, and also an emoji. So we had a meme, and an emoji investigation. I think this might be the first. I can't say for sure, but I think by the Integrity Commissioner in the City of Ottawa. The Integrity Commissioner found that indeed, in the mind of the Integrity Commissioner, Councillor Plante broke the council's code of conduct by posting these allegedly inappropriate memes and emojis in response to some other social media users. And the Integrity Commissioner recommended council reduce the councillor's salary by 3 days. That went to council for a vote. So these things do go to council for a vote. Councillor Plante just actually grilled the Integrity Commissioner over the report. And what happened in the end was council decided not to dock the councillor pay, but give the councillor a reprimand instead. That was a vote of 16-8. And they decided to go with a motion from Councillor Glenn Gower to, instead of docking the councillor's pay, give her a reprimand instead.
Okay. So in other words, agreeing with the Integrity Commissioner's finding, but not the penalty that was imposed.
Mm-hmm.
So Joanne, do you agree with this decision?
Well, first of all, there's two things. Councillor Riley Brockington, also brought another motion that never got voted on because it was superseded by Glenn Gower's motion. And it was to throw the whole thing out, right? There was a number of councillors who actually didn't agree with any of the Integrity Commissioner's report. You know, Stephanie Plante said that it was a freedom of speech issue. And so, you know, that 16-8 vote, I wasn't able to talk to everyone, but it's not that 8 people necessarily wanted to uphold the Integrity Commissioner's report. At least some of them wanted to throw the whole thing out, right? And so it's kind of difficult because, you know, behavior is so subjective, and that's what conduct is. It's behavior, right? And so when you look at the code of conduct, you have to actually, you can't just say, that wasn't that nice, don't do that. You have to actually codify it. And so Section 7 of the Code of Conduct is called bullying and intimidation. And that's where it says, you know, you have to respect colleagues, you have to respect the public, you have to respect your staff. And so I think a lot of people were struggling with the idea that did this, interaction that Stephanie Plante had, who I have to say is with well-known people in the community. It's not like they're political neophytes, right? These are political activist type people. That doesn't mean you shouldn't treat them with respect. In fact, you know, I don't have a lot of time for some of those folks myself, but that is actually the time when you have to treat them with the most respect, right? You can't just be disrespectful. So what happens is, because disrespect falls under, you know, bullying and intimidation, that's kind of what that's what the Integrity Commissioner cited in the report. And I think a lot of people had trouble saying, is this really bullying? Is this really intimidation? It didn't seem it. However, I have to say, that was not a respectful way to deal with people. We are having bad moments in public life where we are trying to have more respect, better dialogue, more respect for the public office. And I don't think that putting a meme of a man going oh, now the man is here to tell us what to do, or whatever the stupid meme was, it might be amusing in some respects. It is not appropriate for a public official to talk like that. I'm sorry. And so I actually think that council had a good balance there, because it's all right, tone matters in politics, and especially when you're a politician. And this is really a slap on the wrist. Nobody cares. The docking of the pay seemed a bit much, so they threw that out. But Stephanie Plante is not satisfied with that, and is going to
Yeah.
court.
Okay. Well, Joanne, let's come back to Stephanie in a minute. But John, I just want to first get your take on the decision by council. Do you think it was the right one?
I actually like the reprimand personally. I agree with Councillor Plante that I don't think it really necessarily warranted a salary decrease. She did actually speak very, passionately but forcefully during council, saying, "Look, this is like my first offense, if you want to call it offense." Like she questions it, but here you are wanting to dock my pay as the integrity commissioner. She didn't agree with that, and so I kind of agree. Like, yeah, there is a bit of a sliding scale. We can have a debate about whether this is a minor offense or not a minor offense, but I think it's on the kind of the minor side. So I do like the idea of a reprimand over what really is a salary deduction in this case.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I have to say that I think that council really should treat the integrity commissioner as the professional that she is, and just take that recommendation and either say yes or no. This we're going to take a bit of your recommendation and massage it and decide to do that. I just don't think council should actually be doing that. Like it's
Yeah.
this is one of their colleagues. It's, I'm sure in many cases one of their friends, and so you just don't have that impartiality. Of course, Karen Shepherd, the integrity commissioner, does, and also had employed or contracted a third party to actually do this investigation. So we have to assume that all of the findings were done on a purely professional basis,
Yes.
and we really, I wish council would just take that decision and say yes or no. You shouldn't really be
It's
playing
so
around with
hard
it.
though, because it depends on the IC when you get down to these smaller things, right? Because I agree with you generally, but like I look back and Robert Marlowe, the previous integrity commissioner, found that George DeRuse had basically interfered in the professional life of a police officer on the force because he was mad at the officer's wife criticizing him on Facebook.
Yeah.
I was appalled by that. He was the first person to ever be sanctioned by the integrity commissioner, and he didn't dock him any pay. And in my mind, I mean, I'm not the integrity commissioner. I feel like I am sometimes, but I'm the scolding matron is what I am. But no, like if I had to put those beside each other, I would have docked George DeRuse a couple days pay over Stephanie Plante, right? So I think it's hard for people when they know each other, but it's always been an issue when the integrity commissioner recommendations have to come back to council. It's very sticky, tricky business, and it never looks good. And I don't think, frankly, that Councillor Plante, she can defend herself, but the length she's going to fight the integrity commissioner, I'm not sure is a great look.
Yeah, John, anything? I just want to come back to the way Stephanie Plante has responded to this, because I'll say that I was actually quite disappointed with it. I mean, really coming out, right, as you mentioned, John, like interrogating the integrity commissioner at the council table, which didn't appear to be the appropriate place to do that. But putting the office in, the credibility of the office into question, going after his professionality, I just thought that was inappropriate. And I think it's important that, sure, councillors should be able to express what they feel. But at the same time, they're representing an organization. They are the public face of the city of Ottawa, and they need to respect a certain level of professional appearance that the city has deemed and codified in the code of conduct. So I was disappointed with the response, and that Stephanie just won't let this go. But your thoughts, John?
Well, it's just, I think, a reminder for elected people, maybe all of us, quite frankly, like watch what you put online and watch what, and Councillor Plante talked a lot about this during council about tone. She was questioning the integrity commissioner over the idea of her tone and whether that in itself was a violation of the code of conduct. I do think for everyone around that council table, I can think of some councillors, former councillors in the past who have said, taken on constituents on social media, said maybe some things.
Remember that there, in the early days of her being on council, yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I don't know if we're past this time, guys, but there was a time, especially with Twitter, that citizens really wanted their elected official to have an online presence because they wanted to know that they could hear directly from elected people and they could actually respond to elected people too directly. And so there was a big appetite to have elected people on things like Twitter, Facebook, talking directly with residents of this city. you've seen a pullback from elected officials, I think, over time, not having that big of a direct response presence on social media with people for good reason. For this type of reason we have in front of us here with Councillor Plant. You know, you get into these situations where some of your
I disagree with
communications.
that.
I think
I
so.
disagree. I
Yeah.
think they're pulling back because they're getting attacked all the time. This is people who were talking about a public issue, which fair. Maybe they were doing it in a way that the counselor felt was inappropriate or not really accurate. And but you combat that with facts, right? You don't combat it with memes and emojis, right? So, but you make a good point. Like, are we going to see a pullback of people from like online this interaction? It's too
Well, I
bad if
think
that's
like
true.
a lot of those counselors who you know didn't really accept the integrity commissioner's report maybe have thought about their own online behavior in the past too and realized that this could be very well be me. But the other thing I
Yeah.
was thinking about, like, what does this mean politically for Councillor Plant? I don't think it's going to hurt her really when it comes to the election. I don't know if her opponents are going to bring this up next year during the election or what, but we'll wait and see. But I'm not surprised the councillors went with a reprimand over the salary deduction.
Yeah, John, I think that's a good point that politically this is a nothing burger.
Yeah.
Um, let's move on to our second topic, which is return to office.
Mm.
So we had the city announce that all municipal employees will be returning to the office 5 days a week starting January the 1st. Now, the city manager made the announcement. And both the city manager and the mayor were very explicit that this was a decision taken by the city manager, senior staff, and that this was not a political decision. So, Joanne, I got to ask you, I mean, like, let's be real here. Is there any way that the city manager made this decision without getting the permission of the mayor?
Yeah, I was just killing myself laughing. That is ridiculous. There's actually no decision made without actually the agreement of the mayor, let alone a giant one like this. Absolutely. I don't know where it originated. I would think that from what the mayor has talked about with downtown revitalization and being up for having, for example, federal employees coming back, I'm not surprised that he would be in favor of this. But I do hear from people that it's going to be kind of a schmozzle, like trying to find people spaces and desks, and is there room for people? And I know, so a few weeks ago, I was at AMO, which is the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. They have a huge conference every year. There's like 2,500 people, and part of it is ministers come and municipalities go and ask ministers for stuff. They have delegations, and I heard from one of my colleagues at Strategy Corp that the finance minister, Pierre Bethenfalvey, was asking every person who came in, okay, what are your return to work plans? What is your return to the office plan, right? Every municipality, no matter what size. I don't know if Ottawa had a delegation with the finance minister, but it goes to show, we know that the provincial government has sent everyone back to work by January. And so the idea that there's not some pressure from the province is foolish. Of course there is.
Okay.
Again, the city manager, I don't think would ever make this kind of a decision without talking to the mayor. And in fact, actually, a councillor has put in an inquiry to ask, would they like to see the rationale for having everybody back? Like, show us the data, show us the number that you said that, you say, oh, this is important. Well, let's see the rationale for that, because they were really taken aback by, the council was very taken aback by the return to the office announcement.
Yeah. Well, John, so a number of councillors did raise objections to this, like quite a large number. Who's making the right decision here? These councillors that say it's too early, it's just not practical, or the senior city staff that are saying we need to get people back in the office?
Wow, Neil, this is such a hard question. I wrestle with it in my mind too, because I think like this is going to be a massive game changer for the city of Ottawa, just like it was a game changer when people went home to start working. I mean, so, there's a societal momentum to bring people back into the office in general, whether you're public service or like especially the private sector right now too. And at some point, the feds, I'm sure, are going to start bringing more people back into the office. So what's that going to happen to our transportation systems in the city? But you know, guys, I was thinking back
Oh, it's a
about 10 years
disaster.
ago. It was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It was 10 years ago, guys, that the former Mayor Watson and other councillors were urging people to work from home. And this was at a time when the LRT system was going to be built, the transit wave was going to go down, there was going to be buses on the roads. And I had to go back because it stuck in my mind. I had to go back. I pulled up an Ottawa
Oh,
Sun
I forgot
headline
that.
from January 2015 that said, Mayor to business and commuters plan to prevent gridlock. And counselors and leaders at the city were telling people, hey, maybe you should work from home. They're telling employers, why don't you give some employees some options to work from home some days of the week so we can relieve some of the transportation issues that we're going to see in the
Oh,
city. And now we're here 10 years later, different time and place. I get it. We didn't know a pandemic was coming. Things were going to change. But now we're asking people to, forget about those ideas about remember the word telecommuting? Forget about
telecommuting.
telecommuting. We want people back in. And so, there's a real push and pull. I don't know what the right answer here is, guys. But all I know is come January, things are going to be very different in our transportation network in the city,
Yeah.
in the region.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd
Yeah. No,
forgotten
no,
that,
no doubt
John.
about it.
That's amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
times have
And
changed.
actually, that was before the LRT too, was it, John?
Well, that was at
Bus
a time
systems
when
were
the
coming
LRT,
down, right? The
yeah, the
transit
transway
system
was
was
the,
being pulled up.
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, listen. I mean, that's the prospect that we're facing over the coming months, right? You look at the people that are heading downtown right now, and the number of people that have switched from transit to driving is quite remarkable. People,
I'm back in
getting
my
in
office
very
here. I drove down this morning. I could not find a parking spot at 10:30 this morning in
wow. Yeah.
downtown, and I came back home,
Yeah.
which is why I'm in my
Yeah.
purple den here. But yeah, like it's how is this going to work? And what if the feds go back to school? Go back to work to the office as well, right? There's always a big story that's going to happen.
Yeah.
I hear we don't have enough daycare spots. Like we don't have
Yep.
before and after school spots. The congestion's terrible. It's going to get worse. There's no way the transit can connect it. I mean, it might be better when the LRT is open. We still hope that the LRT2 is going to, on the east end, is going to open this year. I haven't heard much about that lately, but it's going to be more than a year before the western part opens, and we can't get people on the buses to the transit system, like to the Chinese section in the west end. We literally don't have enough buses. They cannot build them fast enough.
Yeah.
How are we going to do this?
Yeah.
It's going to be a mess.
Yeah. Hey, Joanne, I want to come back to the point that you raised about the provincial government, basically advocating with municipalities to bring their workers back. How much of an influence do you think that had? I mean, Premier Doug Ford mentioned this out loud, like just a few days before the announcement. Do you think that was the catalyst that pushed Ottawa over the edge, or was
Yeah, I mean,
this in the works for some time?
I want to just say I don't think it was in the works because everybody seemed very surprised. And I have to say I don't have any insider information. It's not that I have any kind of secret source, but the premier was like lauding Mayor Sutcliffe, saying this is great. Everyone should follow his example. I would also say I could imagine if this is the kind of thing, it's obviously the return to the office is something that the progressive conservative government believes in. They're doing it themselves. We know they've been asking the municipalities to do it. And we know that Ottawa is negotiating, for example, for more money for transit. We're possibly negotiating for the upload of the LRT. These things, that kind of political pressure is very daunting, right? I mean, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. So I can completely see that being the case. Again, though, I should say I don't have any 100% inside information, but my understanding is that is part of it, and it's understandable in my view. But it's really hard because it's going to we're gonna live the consequences of that kind of political pressure.
Yeah. Well, John, I want to ask you a political question, and I want to hear your thoughts on whether you think Mayor Sutcliffe will wear this, right? In a year's time at the next election, both the return to office of the city workers, which is really, I think in the grand scheme of things is actually not that great because there'll be some heading down to Laurier Avenue, but many heading out to Centrepoint and Nepean and also a facility in Gloucester.
And I think it's a small percentage of people who are not back full time anyway, right?
Well, but actually, Joanne, I just want to. What the city manager said is that 85% of city employees were already back at work 5 days a week. But we're talking about bus drivers and people
Mhm.
actually doing frontline work, right? Of course
Yeah,
they're
absolutely. Yes.
back at the office. I do think that when you look at the administrative offices like City Hall, those were probably quite like empty, if I can use that term. There was not a return to office. I don't think that had taken place in a big way at those administrative locations. But John, can I ask you that political question? I mean, do you think the mayor's gone to great lengths to try to distance himself from this decision? But as we talked about earlier, I think most people are going to point the finger at him, or give him the credit as the premier has done. So, what do you think? What do you think this means for Mark Sutcliffe?
Well, it's a great question. This is a city made up of public servants, whether you're a federal or municipal or
Yes.
provincial, right? So this a decision like this, I would argue, guys, this is the most important decision for an elected person in this part of the country, right? Whether to send workers back to the office. So does Mark Sutcliffe wear this for better or for worse next year? You know what? I'm curious to see, like, as more people, public servants, return to the office. We've talked a lot about this. What's it going to do for the downtown? I'm sure you guys read the editorial in the Globe and Mail a few days ago that advocated for bringing people back downtown to
Wasn't that
revitalize.
written in 2009? Because they were
Yeah,
still calling about for an aquarium. What? Like
yeah.
the failed aquarium bid. What are you even talking about? But
I
yes,
don't know. Was that Le
yeah,
Breton? Yeah.
I know it's
So,
crazy.
to your question, Neil, like, I don't know, like, how's this going to reflect? Like, what
Yeah.
if things start to look a little bit better? Like, that's pretty quick turnaround for the economy to improve downtown and things to look better. So I think we're going to see the evidence on the streets possibly in a year from now, and maybe. And if you're Mayor Sutcliffe, you're hoping to point to evidence that shows that return to office is a good thing for the city, but it's really going to get down to every single household. Is return to office good for my household? Has it been good for my household? And if the answer is no, then yes, the mayor better look out come the municipal election next year.
Yeah, I think it's like if you're in a public union, you are not happy. If you have a small business, maybe you're happy. But I also think it's what does my day to day look like, right, in a year? And if it's I'm spending 2 hours longer on the road, I don't know who's going to pick up my kid. I can't find
Yeah.
my a spot like after school spot for my kid. Like the roads are jammed, the buses are jammed. We will see.
Yeah.
Like
That's
that's not going to be
that's
good.
a Yeah, that's a really key point, Joanne, especially when we're hearing about these commutes from Barhaven that are taking 2 hours in one direction, right? That's just not, that's going to upset a lot of people. Let's move on to topic number three, which is budget directions. Now, we talked about this last week, where we heard that the tax increase is being proposed at 3.75%, which includes a increase in the police budget of 6.5%. Um, one thing we didn't talk about was transit. We didn't
Mm.
have a chance to talk about that last week, transit. So I'd like to turn to that now. And if I can just, the numbers that are being quoted are we're going to have to spend more on transit. So there's going to be the transit levy, which is the levy that everyone pays on their tax bill for transit. That's going to go up by
Not quite
up to
everybody, right? Some
15%.
rural areas
Oh,
don't
you're
pay
right.
it
Not quite
because they
everybody.
don't get bus. But yes, fair.
Yes.
Almost everyone.
If you're in the part of the far ends of the city that do not get bus service, yeah, you don't pay the transit levy. Thanks, Joanne. So that could go up by 15%. We're also talking about the fares going up by a maximum of 7.5%. So significant jump. John, I just wanted to start you off with the question of fares. Can fares of up to 7.5% more? Can we? I mean, as a transit system, can we get away with that?
uh, I like to say no. That's the fares, Neil, is the one big issue I think in this budget that I'm really worried about. If we're looking to increase, if we're hitting people in the pocketbook that much, 7.5%. I'll just give you a
Yeah.
quick anecdote, guys. I went back to school shopping at the Rideau Center a few days ago. I don't live far from downtown, right? It's an LRT ride. And I was debating whether it's worth, so it's $4 for adults for me and my wife to go down. We'll take our son. So that's $8 there, another $8 back. Okay, $16 for the trip. And I know parking at the Rideau Center, I think, is $20. is the max, the
Yeah,
daily max.
yeah.
And so I'm
Yeah.
thinking like, do I want to carry all these bags with me on the trains? And by the way, the trains are pretty busy on the weekend. I got to tell you, they're pretty popular. Fantastic. But do I want to carry all these bags with me on the transit system to lug around? Or do I just want to load them into my trunk and get back home? And if I'm thinking that, I bet other people are thinking that too. And I'm lucky I live as close as I do to a major mall like that where I can make these decisions. There's people who rely on transit. So hitting them 7.5% more possibly at the upper end to pay in fares, that's big. And I'm worried. For many years now, we've seen fares creep. We're at $4 now, right, for a cash fare, a single ride. And
405.
I don't 405, and so
If you
if we're
don't have a
seven.
Presto card, that's right. You get 5 cents off, I think. Yeah.
So yeah, Neil, to your point, yeah, I'm worried about
Yeah.
that transit fare, and at some point,
Yeah.
we've been talking about this for years, guys. But at some point, when is an upper government going to make a decision to say, look, we need to help out operations here in a way that's going to relax the fare for municipalities, because otherwise, people are gonna be making these decisions, possibly choosing
Yeah.
non-sustainable modes of transportation over our transit system.
Yeah. Well, I was listening to the I was listening to the committee discussion, and I think it was Glenn Gower that pointed out that the reason we have a transit levy
Yeah.
is because of the province withdrawing its funding many years ago.
Yeah, the Harris government.
So
The province used to pay half of the operating costs of municipal
yeah,
transit systems, and now they pay nothing. And so
yeah.
it's expensive, yeah.
What do you say to households that just don't take the bus? They're like a typical household is already paying $1,000 a year for transit, whether they get on a bus or not. And so, what do you say to them about the prospect of that going up by up to 15%?
Well, first of all, I would say the way governments work is we all pay for everything all the time. Like, I don't remember the last time I was at a hockey game or a football game, but you don't hear me saying, I'm not paying for Lansdowne, right? Like, that is not how government works. We all pay for everything. Also, we have to start thinking about transit like a city, essential city service like roads. Do we tell people to pay for roads? We pay for them through our taxes. You could pay for roads. People who say, I think there's Councillor Brown was up for
Yes.
increasing the fares, saying, "Oh, I feel if you're going to use a service, you should pay for that." How about tolls for roads? Is he up for that? Because that's a service that people pay for. In fact, you'd say people who take the bus are using the roads a lot less. They're putting less wear and tear on the roads. They are giving, they're contributing less to congestion, and as well as improving the environment. Although I know we don't talk about the environment anymore. Apparently, climate change is very last year. But there are a lot of benefits to transit that we have to invest in. And yes, 100%, the province has to help out. But we've been saying this for a long time, and just waiting for them to come along and fix it, and they haven't. And now we're in big trouble. And we are in a death spiral here in transit. We have let it go
Yeah.
for years, over the years of Watson, over into these years, and rebuilding it is going to take 20 years now. Yes, the LRT will help when it comes online eventually. I hope that it works well, but the next few years we're in trouble. And if we lose those riders forever, which we are every year, again this year, our ridership is lower than was predicted in the last budget. That's another reason we have a big deficit this year. It's going to just get worse. And those riders, it's going to take us a long time to get them back. And we're not helping ourselves with, charging teenagers, full adult fares, right? We just seem to
Yeah.
be doing all the wrong things. I'm really, really worried about transit. I always have been, concerned about it. It's a big focus, of course, for all of us who watch City Hall. But now I'm thinking, I'm really concerned. I've never seen it
Yeah.
quite this bad.
Yeah. Well, I always say that for those that are skeptical about making payments for transit when they don't use it, I just say, turn the time machine back to 2008 when we had a bus strike in this city, and getting around Ottawa without buses was an absolute nightmare. I mean, I was driving every day, and it was just like the worst driving experience of my life. For
And how many
no
more
other
people now
reason.
are here, right? That was
Yeah.
almost 20 years ago. We have so many more
Yeah.
people, and the roads are already busy. and that's like
Yeah.
with the buses. So I mean, it's very short-sighted to say,
Yeah.
that people should pay for it. It's crazy.
Um, John, the so we've been told that the 3.75% tax increase would amount to $166 per household. Um, and if you figure that out on a monthly basis, that works out to about $14 a month. So we've gotten into this habit where we agonize over every like point increase in tax in property taxes, and that they're we're almost presented as if it's this enormous amount that is going to be this big this big impact on your household budget. But I mean, when are we going to get over this? And Councillor Brockington
Bradley Brockington.
saying, like the streets are just falling apart, right? We need basic services. And at what point do we get beyond this, this infatuation with just the single number, just the headline number? I mean, are we going to get beyond this at any point?
No, because it's in politics. It's tied into politics. But I mean, but we and we've talked before. Like all it takes is a big friggin' water main break, something going wrong with
Yeah.
your community center, your arena, to really make people think about what needs to be maintained in the city. But I'll say this too, because I always try to think of people who $14 a month might be a lot, right? Sure, they own their own home. Sometimes we think everyone who owns a property are friggin' millionaires, which is not true, right? And so I try to think of the folks who $14 a month could mean, pet food or something, or maybe like even like they enjoy their streaming service that they like. They make a donation maybe to their neighborhood food bank, that $14. So something might give for other households, I don't like assuming everyone has the means, and it adds up every year. And sometimes I think the loud voices that I hear the most are people saying we need a higher tax increase, which is probably true to pay for what we need to pay. But I always think about people too who maybe $14 might be a lot, even if you own your own property, but you still are paying taxes.
For
Want more taxes
$14, you
every year.
can't take the bus 3 times in the in a month, right? And so I was listening to Jeff Leeper say that too. It's like, yes, of course we have to worry about affordability, but the property taxes aren't the only thing, right? If we cut back on services, you can't get daycare, a subsidized daycare spot. You can't get. It costs forever to or costs a ton to take a unreliable bus system. That's part of the affordability. Affordability is there's other things that are involved in affordability that the city is involved in. So yeah, it's very hard politically to say that, and I take your point, John, that just because you own a house, or even if you rent a house, the landlord is passing those taxes on to you. Those bits can matter for some people, but we have to think of this in a bigger picture, right? Like even the transit levy, if it's increased by 15% transit levy increase, that is just under a 2% tax increase overall, right? Like it's not like it doesn't increase your taxes by 15%. And what are you getting for that? Well, like you're getting some service that maybe you can use that is going to help you so that you don't have to drive your kids around all the time, or a lot of other things, right? So yeah, it's a very it's a difficult. On one hand, it's simple, but it's also difficult, right? Like it seems very simple to say, well, we're worried about the affordability of households. Of course you are, but what does that mean? It's very complex what affordability means and how you live your life in the city, if the city is livable for people.
I've got a question for the two of you, and you raise a good point there, Joanne, is that transit levy is equivalent to a property tax increase of some amount. But I'm assuming that whatever increases we have to the transit levy are going to be incorporated into that 3.75% property tax increase. And if that's the case, how can they not know what that number is? I mean, they've got the property tax increase down to 2 decimal points, but then they can't tell us what the
that's a good point.
transit levy.
That's an excellent point.
Yeah.
Excellent point. I guess maybe it depends on how much the fares go up and how much the levy goes up. I don't know. I have no idea.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Okay.
Sorry, guys. Do we know that for certain?
Yeah.
Do we know that for certain that the transit levy, the transit tax, is rolled into that 375?
You're absolutely right, John. And we don't. Well, that's the assumption.
But that's what they're saying, right? They're saying everything outside of transit and police have to be 2.9%, and it's an overall tax increase of 3.75. That's my understanding of it, but
Okay.
But remember what they did last year. It's to John's point, right? That last year I can't remember what the initial headline number was, but then it said plus the transit levy, and so then luckily
mm,
everyone sort of gravitated to the aggregate number, the true representation of what your taxes would how they would increase. But yeah, we don't. I guess you're right, John. We don't know what the
mm,
maybe we don't know what the final number is.
Traditionally, the city has carved out the transit levy or transit tax, aside from the operational tax,
okay.
to make it because it's usually a little bit. Sometimes it's different, right? Like by a percentage point even. So I just question. So I don't know for sure
Oh,
if that
all right.
375 has got the transit tax rolled in. So
Okay.
something maybe we
Oh,
have to
maybe it's because
investigate.
it has the police rolled in, right? He'll have the police budget rolled in
Hmm.
Okay.
because
Well, I guess we're going to find out pretty soon. Um,
a couple months.
Joanne, can I just ask you a question about savings? So the city talked about that they over the last 3 years they have found $207 million in savings, which they call a 10% savings on your 10% tax savings essentially. I've got problems with that, but I want to get your take on it.
Um, I've been covering the city. I've been watching City Hall relatively closely since 2010, and in every single year there's efficiencies. Oh, look at the savings we
Yeah,
found, and every city manager, Steve Kanalakis before Wendy Stephenson and before Steve Kent Kirkpatrick, at the beginning of every budget season, I'm pretty sure they're like, okay, what are the discretionary things that we can do here, that we can cut, that we can find, because people are trying to you know, increase taxes as little as possible. In fact, I found a report today that said since 2004 we've saved $500 million in efficiencies, right? So this happens all the time, and I don't think that either staff or council are just going to just roll over every single service and spending into the next year and go no, that's what we need for our taxes. No, they're looking at this stuff all the time, right? So as well, it's things sometimes like empty, vacant spot, vacant staff spots that are being kept open. So on paper, they're money, but they get
yeah.
rid of them. Discretionary spending and hiring has been frozen. Now it'll be interesting because last year they announced Mayor Mark Sutcliffe and councillors Kathy Curry and Marty Carr were on a service review working group and working to see what can be cut and what can be reduced or done more efficiently, basically where they could find savings. And their report is going to come out, itemized report before the budget. So we'll see what there is there. A couple, CTV's done a couple of little stories, for example, I didn't know this, but if you have an RV, the city would take your wastewater for free, but now you're going to have to pay. Which is fair enough, but I think that only saves $45,000 a year. And also, in Manotick, the city had owned a couple of historical buildings, and now they're going to give them to the nonprofit that runs Watson Mills, because they have $1 million worth of deferred work on them. And Watson Mills, here's a gift for you. So getting those off the books. So we're going to see things like that. It'll be interesting to see where all these things are, right? I mean, the biggest efficiencies, Neil, you were talking earlier before the show, and you've done work on this, and that is they've cut a lot of money out of transit services. Is that efficient?
Yeah.
And in fact, this new way to bus, which is less bus service, because it was delayed, that delay actually costs more money. The city treasurer yesterday was saying during committee said, we've had an extra expenses this year because the new ways to bus has been delayed by a couple of months, and that was supposed to, bring in savings. So efficiencies or cuts to service, how do you want to call it, right? And so
Yeah.
These things have been talked about for many, many years, and
Yeah.
I often think it's hard to see exactly where they are. So I look forward to the report, the line by line report.
Okay, so the last word on the budget directions to John, and that's John. Joanne's right that every year they trot this out at the beginning of the process, right? Well, we've made so much savings, and it's. Do you think anyone pays attention to that? They just look at the increase number. They say, well, how come my taxes are going up then?
Yeah, people will look at how much more they're paying, how they're getting hit in their
Yeah.
pocketbook. But like to your both your points, like I want to see, and I'll be curious to see the report, Joanne, when it comes out about where they're finding specifically the savings, because it's rare, aside from the optimization of the transit system, to know where exactly they're reducing budgets, and I want to see where exactly. So we're
Hmm.
talking hundreds of millions of dollars here that they've said they've
Yeah.
found, right, in efficiencies. So I'm curious. Like I remember back to Joanne the Steve Kanellakis days where they created, I think Service Ottawa was created in his time, where they found a
Hmm.
more efficient way of doing things. And so I'm curious to see what has happened since then, where they found all these other efficiencies. Did it happen during the
John,
pandemic? I don't know, but we'll hopefully find out within a matter of a couple months.
John, I'm going to tell you all that savings that come from the training budgets, the travel budgets, and the stationary budgets.
Paper clips. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Reducing paper clips. Okay, listen, it is time to turn to the lightning round. I don't have my bell with me, but this is the lightning
Oh
round.
no.
So, Joanne, back in July, there was some chatter among councillors about advocating for a pay increase. Now, councillors make about $119,000, $120,000 a year. And there was a discussion of increasing that by about 15%. Now, the mayor was not in favor of this, but that topic is back on the agenda. It's coming to council at, I believe it's next meeting. So do you think a pay increase is warranted here?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I think one thing is they're not saying that they would get it immediately. The motion that they will be discussing says in the next term of council, it should be reviewed every like in the second or third year of council to make sure that the what councillors in Ottawa are getting paid is about the median of what councillors in Ontario were paid. They did look at that in 2024, and city councillors in Ottawa were getting paid the median. But since then, Toronto has given themselves the Toronto councillors have given themselves a big raise, so we would be now below the median because of Toronto. So I think that's what they're looking at.
Okay.
I think those are hard jobs. I get it. I know that some of them say they look at, for example, a program manager at the city makes $25,000 more than counselors do, right? And they feel like they do just as much work. They're working 24/7. I do say politically, it is a terrible idea. I think, like we're having like $120,000 is, I don't know. Maybe it's because I was a journalist. That seems like a not bad salary. Maybe not in like the world of public servant management, maybe, but we're going into an era where federal public servants might lose their jobs. There's,
Yeah.
economic restraint happening. We haven't felt all the effects of the tariff war. I don't think this is the moment, but
Okay.
we'll see what
No.
happens. I don't know. John, what do you think?
Okay. Well, yeah, John. Like on a related note, do you think it's this idea that Ottawa councillors should essentially be paid similar to what their peers are, and as Joanne mentions, Toronto's sort of pulling the average up. I mean, do you think that's a good reason to increase councillor salaries?
I think it's a worth consideration. I always like the idea of like increasing the council member salary by the management increase every year. Now that's like, but you run into the political wild card, right? It's an easy thing to just to pause as a political move if you're the mayor or you're a council. Now, $120,000 is a lot of money to a lot of households in the city, and so that's that. But on the other side, like council members do work a lot. Like I don't know, I can't really put them up against MPs and backbench MPs and MPPs, let's say. But like, look, city councilors are going to community meetings, they're out in the community all the time, going to all sorts of stuff across the city, but it's certainly in their wards, and so they do put in a lot of hours. I don't know if 120 is the number, but I do like the idea of it being reviewed every 2 years. That sounds actually pretty good too, because they're I don't know what they would make hourly. I would be curious to know what a city councilor makes hourly if you were to crunch the numbers. But
I guess it depends on the councillor, right?
it depends on the councilor, but some residents might be surprised actually.
Yeah. Okay. Look, let's wrap it there. And I think I'm speaking on behalf of all of us that, yeah, there's no doubt that like the job of city councilor is an incredibly tough one, incredibly demanding, and those that take it to its full extent are working 24/7 and doing a tremendous service to the community. I want to say that we will be so that's the end of the podcast for this week. We're going to take a couple of weeks break. We will be back later in September. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I want to thank our panelists, John and Joanne. And please, as always, leave us a comment. We'd love to hear what you have to say. And if you leave a comment, we'll do our best to respond to it in the next recording. So we will talk to you soon. Until then, this has been the Better Ottawa Municipal Panel.